If you're going to do this command line stuff, you need for loops. For you, I'm going to go over for loops in Bash and PowerShell. I almost fainted there. The reason I've chosen those two is because they're the most common command lines and they're the simplest for learning those powerful operations. I originally didn't want to do PowerShell, but I did some math and I found out that I can't get away from it. So I'm stuck talking about that cancerous growth. We're going to be using things like brace expansion, which are not supported by the POSIX standard, but I think that kind of stuff is going to be okay for you, at least for right now. So what do we need a for loop for? If the utilities that you have access to or that you know of are not complex enough to do certain tasks, you can usually use a for loop to get that done. For example, in the last video, we were able to erase targeted files in very different locations. We were even able to edit thousands of targeted files like it was nothing. I know a lot of people are going to complain because there are more efficient ways to do that in most cases, but that is a power of your for loop. The form of a for loop in Bash is going to look like this. Pay attention to how I'm saying for var in arg1, arg2, arg3 do echo var done. So all we're doing here is we're creating var and we're loading it with these. And what I've done here is I've told it to print whatever's inside var. So let's see what this thing does. So what happened here is we made var arg1 and then we printed what's inside var. Then we made var arg2 and we printed what's inside var. Then we made var arg3 and we printed what's inside var one more time. Then we had nothing else to do, so we exited out. And that is how every single for loop works. Unless you have very specific arguments that are hard to pass to the shell, this is obviously not a very useful form of the for loop. To help us not need to type out everything, we're going to use something called brace expansion. Brace expansion is where we hand the shell a range and we tell it just go through all the characters in that range until you run out. It looks a little something like this. What do we think we do 100? So with brace expansion, we can create entries with ranges instead of explicitly typing them out. What that means for you is instead of doing 1 through 100 by hand, you can just tell the computer to do 1 through 100 and it will do it. But what if I want every 10th entry? That's actually pretty easy to do as well. Let me show you. So now you're starting to see one of the reasons that people have problems with using computers how they're supposed to be used. I wanted 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and this is what I got. In order to make sure that this comes out right, we actually have to make sure that the first entry fits our pattern. So let's go ahead and fix this pattern. Yeah, so that's cool that I can print a couple of numbers on the screen. But for those of you who haven't seen the last video, what can I actually do with it? You can create and manage files and folders. You can do complex tasks across your entire computer all at once. How about anything that you imagine would take 10 hours of your life or more? You can just spend 5 to 10 minutes figuring out one of these bad boys and you're done. So that's enough ranting, that's enough about Bash. Let's move over to Windows and talk about PowerShell. The experience is not that bad. The PowerShell version of a for loop is a lot closer to the traditional way of writing a for loop. The only thing you're really able to do is define a range. However, you're able to do a lot more with that range. We have the initialization of our variable, which is var equals 0. We have what we do with our variable, which is var is less than 51. And we have the increment of our variable, which is var++, which is increase var by 1 each time. Let's see what that does. As you can see, hopefully, we were able to count to 50 really fast. With this form of a for loop, we're not actually able to attach any kinds of like words or anything to the variable. We have to do it in the actual output. What do I mean by that? See this right host, which is how you print something? We attach it here. No. Stop. So now we've created a program that says hello 50 times. The greatest, most powerful program I have ever seen. You should be having another question right now, which is, Mike, how can I print something based on arguments the way that we did in the Bash shell? In that case, we're going to use something called a for each loop. The for each loop allows us to do what we were doing in the bash shell, where we had specific entries that we were passing it and we were generating entries, all that cool stuff. But in this case, we have to use a variable and we have to pass the variable to the loop. So it's going to look something like this. We have our array, which is our variable that we're going to pass all of the arguments that we want to express. And then the for each loop gets the array over here and then outputs it as a variable, which we write to the console. So let's go ahead and do that. This way we can replicate exactly what we did in the bash script. By the way, that's my fat finger. Compared to bash, it's super clunky, but at the same time, that still beats doing 1,000 operations by hand. So there you have it, for loops in bash and PowerShell. Like and sub if you liked it, hit the bell if you're so inclined, and I hope to see you in the next one.